My fellow Americans,
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, and tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've
still
already
in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the major's. The major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second. He says, we've made the decision we're going to war with Iraq. I said, we're going to war with Iraq? Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Redacted, everybody. Clayton's back. Everybody, welcome Clayton back to the show. But I'm in charge, just so you know.
No,
yes,
can't happen.
I'm going to do this part. I do this part now.
Okay, good.
Since you've been resigned.
Since I'm high on NyQuil
taking
today.
days off. So thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot of news to get to this week. I do have a co-host. I'm Natalie Morris. This is Clayton. He's also here. Just kidding. Welcome back. Welcome back, darling.
Thanks. Welcome back. Welcome back to me. Look at this old scrub is back.
We have low energy Clayton today.
Yeah. No, I mean, jet lagged. I have no sleep at all, but I am here, and I'm on cold medicine. But we've got a show to do, so
we expect your best. We expect your best.
We don't screw around. We don't screw around. We tell our kids there's no laziness in our household, so you buck up. You show up. You do the work. You work hard. You work hard. That's what you do. So hey, good to see all of you. We've got a jam-packed show for you on this Monday because there's a lot of moving pieces right now in Israel, in the Middle East, the Biden administration's response to what Netanyahu is planning in Gaza. And they are basically backed into a corner. Has basically Israel crossed a red line as it relates to Gaza. There's no going back. We're going to look at all of that. And we're going to have a deep dive on that a little bit later in the show.
Plus, President Zelensky is saying, hey, I'm over here. I'm still over here. I'd like some money, please. I'd like some weapon, please. We're going to look at the status of the war in Ukraine and why he thinks we're doing all right. We're doing good here. We're still the center of, the world of Warcraft. So please come back.
And also, there's a lot of Jews and Jewish Americans who've been going to a lot of these anti-war rallies. But the media, for some reason, is choosing not to talk about it and almost kind of play it out there that it's like Israel versus Palestinians. And my gosh, no Jews would possibly go to a pro-Palestine rally or an anti-war rally, an anti-genocide rally. Why would Jews do that? Turns out there's thousands of them that are doing that. But the media doesn't want you to know about that at all because they have a certain narrative that they're trying to shove down your throat. But we are going to look at it tonight. So all of that and more as Redacted starts right now.
All right, well, it's Monday. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our content over the weekend. Remember, we are live every Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We cover the shows that the mainstream media largely ignores, the stories and the angles. We have no agenda here other than peace and dismantling narratives that hand power to powerful people who do not have our best. This is the intention with which we bring you this show. This is the intention with which we bring you our daily newsletter as well.
Yeah, can I tell them about the newsletter?
Okay, you can do that part. Sure.
I would love to tell them about the newsletter because I haven't had a chance to talk about it. But it is also, I saw someone in the airport said, I love your morning newsletter. And I said, thank you so much. They're like, it's the perfect way to start our day. We love it. So the way to get it, it's totally free. Why wouldn't you get it? It's totally free. And it's our way to stay connected with you because these platforms love to censor us and block us and ban us. And that way we have a way to stay connected with you and say, hey, here's what happened. Anyway, all you need to do is go to redacted.inc. You put in your email address, and then you'll receive a welcome email. Now, it might wind up in your spam folder. It might wind up in your garbage. Gmail has labeled us as dangerous, so you might even get a warning that when you subscribe to the Redacted newsletter that it's dangerous, which I love that because we tell the truth here that our newsletter is dangerous. Anyway, you can read it in about 5 to 10 minutes over your cup of coffee first thing in the morning. Just go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then tomorrow morning, Tuesday, you'll get the newsletter around breakfast time. And again, you can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes. Redacted.inc. Well, the number of children killed in Gaza now sits over 4,000, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Close to 10,000 people killed in a month of continuous Israeli airstrikes. Newly released satellite images are just stunning to look at this morning. Shows what Gaza looked like before and what it looks like now. Take a look at these images. And this weekend, an Israeli heritage minister said in an interview that dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza was a possibility. And he said that there's no such thing as a civilian, that everyone is basically involved in the October 7th terrorist attacks. in his words. So those 4,000 children, they are also part of this. They are also part of the attacks, I guess, the 4,000 children. Let's try to unpack this, because there's a lot of moving pieces this morning that I want to try to understand here. Let's bring in United Nations Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter. Scott, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Israeli officials today, I'll just kind of give you what their words are, Scott. These are not my words, saying Israeli officials today have called these civilian casualties. They're aware of them. They're calling them, quote, the tragedy of war, end quote. They also say their response, which includes this expanding ground operation in Gaza, is necessary to root out and destroy Hamas after what happened on October 7th. So these 4,000 children, let's talk about that number. First of all, do you feel confident in that number? Because what obviously people online will say is, how can you trust what the Palestinian Health Authority has to say about this number? Does that number sound right to you based on your own sourcing and the upwards of 10,000 overall killed so far in these Israeli strikes?
The number actually sounds low. Let's keep in mind that that number doesn't include the missing. That these are the bodies counted. There are many thousands more missing. When a building goes down, they're in the rubble. For all those Americans out there that rally around 9/11, you know what happened with those buildings when they came down, how difficult it was to account for the numbers. It's happening right now. This is what's happening is a war crime of unimaginable scope and scale. I mean, no, first of all, it is imaginable. It's real. It's happening. It's not unimaginable. It's right there in front of us, guys. They're literally leveling a city. They're leveling, neighborhoods filled with civilians. This is the most despicable behavior imaginable, but it wasn't unpredictable. Clayton, Israel since 2006 has articulated this very policy. Why is the world only waking up now to the fact that it is official Israeli policy to punish the civilian population of an entity that they have violent disagreement with? In 2006, the commander of Israeli forces in the north, when fighting Hezbollah, instituted what he called the Dahiwa principle. Dahiwa is a neighborhood in West Beirut that was leveled by Israel, flattened. They slaughtered the civilian population there because he said they will pay the price for Hezbollah daring to stand up and beat our troops on the ground. See, Israel can't do a fair fight, man on man, soldier against soldier. They can't do that, because if they do that, they lose. The only way Israel can win is to collectively punish the civilian population in a vain effort to get them to submit. It didn't work in 2006. It didn't work in 2008 when they instituted the Dahiwa principle on Gaza for the first time. 2010, 2014, 2018, 2020, 2021, and now 2023. It's been going on forever. The Israelis are the greatest mass murderers in modern history. That's the truth.
So when you have this, what's being portrayed as sort of this errant heritage minister from Israel, who then Netanyahu suspends this weekend for saying they would drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza, that's not really an errant heritage minister. That is really a sentiment that is carried by many Israelis. I've spoken to a number of Israelis who've told me specifically they feel the same exact way, that there is no daylight at all between Hamas and Palestinians in their mind, and they feel that there is no solution but the destruction and the wiping out of Gaza. Those are their words telling us that.
Well, the only thing that this minister was errant for was openly acknowledging the existence of an Israeli nuclear weapons program. That's what he's in trouble for, not for articulating in favor of the death of Palestinian civilians. It's official Israeli policy to kill Palestinians officially. He would never get in trouble for that. I mean, we know what Israel's going to do. They've told us what they're going to do. They've done it. This is not unprecedented. It's what Israel does. It's not what we do.
Is the Biden administration then willfully ignorant about it? Because Kamala Harris this weekend, of course, comes out and says, she posted an Instagram video where she says, we're going to make sure that they're really taking care of and protecting civilians. We're making sure, we're monitoring that, making sure that they're going to protect civilians, and we're working with them on that. And that's a concern of ours. And I've heard that from a number of Biden administration officials at the State Department last week saying the same thing, that we're confident that Israel is making sure that civilians won't be harmed in this. So that's it, Scott. That's all you need to know. Kamala Harris has spoken. They're confident that no civilians will be harmed in this.
Yeah, and yet we're continuing to fly C-17 aircraft into Israel, offloading the munitions that are used by the Israeli Air Force, flying American-provided aircraft to slaughter these Palestinian civilians. Kamala Harris is a liar, a hypocrite, but she's a politician. Her lips move, she lies. Joe Biden, the same thing. Look, I can guarantee you this, that it's someday down the road when archives are declassified, you will be seeing the hypocrisy of the Biden administration in full view, as behind the scenes, they are having conversations. And I guarantee you what the conversations are. They're very critical of Israel. How can they do this? Bibi's gone crazy. He's gone wild. He won't listen to us. There's nothing we can do. Well, there is something you can do, Kamala. Terminate all assistance to Israel. Terminate it right now. Tell the Israelis not another airplane lands until there's a ceasefire. And during that ceasefire, get all the humanitarian aid into Gaza that needs. And during that ceasefire, an American delegation will come to Israel and take over your targeting cell. You will never drop another American-made bomb using an American-made aircraft on Gaza unless we personally approve the target. And if you don't like it, we're done with you. That's how you take control. That's called leadership. But we won't do that because Israel bought Congress a long time ago.
And now we're hearing that, well, Hamas is not destroyed. And when will this happen where they feel like they are close to wrapping up some sort of an operation to get Hamas? So U.S. officials this weekend, according to the New York Times, saying that despite massive bombing and this ground invasion of Gaza, the Pentagon believes that Israel has not come close, not even close, to taking out Hamas's leadership. So is this the New York Times sort of doing the dirty work for the Biden administration, painting a picture here that they're not anywhere close to the finish of this operation? They need to go into the tunnels. They need to do whatever they can. Can you talk about that sort of strategy and the sort of Pentagon sources leaking this to the New York Times, and we all get to read how Hamas is still out there?
Well, it's interesting. Talk about sources. Seymour Hersh, who I consider to be a very good friend, just published a piece in his Substack that makes it sound like Hamas is lost, that their leadership has been destroyed, that their food supply is turning rancid. They're going to all suffocate because of a lack of oxygen. That's a source speaking to Seymour Hersh. It's 100% wrong. Hamas, if people don't understand this, by deconstructing what happened on October 7th. Hamas is a much better organization, a much stronger organization, a much more capable organization, a much more professional organization than anybody had given them credit for. What they did on October 7th was one of the most skillfully executed military operations in modern history. Literally a David attacking a Goliath, which is sort of ironic given who they're attacking. But they have planned for the Israelis. The Israelis have walked into a Hamas trap. The Hamas trap is very complex. It's not just about the military situation on the ground. It's about the geopolitical situation globally. Hamas has won this war already. Has already won. Why?
Yeah, when you see tens of thousands of protests in streets.
Hundreds of thousands, millions around the world. Hamas has flipped the script. No one's talking about October 7th. That's the strategic mistake that Israel made. Just like the United States made a strategic mistake after 9/11. When the world rallied around us, instead of taking advantage of that to destroy the ideology of hatred by promoting a balanced approach, a diplomatic approach to defeat, Al-Qaeda, by letting others defeat them. We said we will do this militarily. And look, Al-Qaeda has not been defeated because killing Osama bin Laden, killing Zawahiri, killing other Al-Qaeda leadership doesn't destroy the ideology. The bombing we've done made Al-Qaeda stronger and spread even more. Israel is made the same mistake. Had they, on October 8th, secured the border and then asked the question, How did this happen? Why did this happen? And we want the world to rally with us as we seek to find a solution to this. There would be millions of people in the streets today demonstrating in support of Israel and against Hamas. But Israel did what everybody knew they were to do because it is their doctrine to do it, to bomb. They have not destroyed Hamas. Hamas is planned for a 90-day campaign. They have sufficient resources underground for 90 days of fighting. We are 30 days into this campaign, and Israel's already losing. Israel may be making progress above ground, but as every Israeli commander will tell you, we control nothing because you can't control above ground when below ground is Hamas, just like standing on an anthill. All you do is guarantee that the ants will come out and sting you and bite you. That's what Hamas is doing. It's a death by 1,000 cuts for the Israelis. Every day they lose more troops, more vehicles. They secure nothing, and they haven't even begun to move into the actual heavy urban areas. The Israeli army has lost. The Israeli politicians has lost. Benjamin Netanyahu is lost. He has no one has confidence. As we speak, there's demonstrators in front of his residence calling for his resignation. Normally, under wartime conditions, the nation rallies around their leader. Israel is not rallying around Bibi Netanyahu. He is a criminal. Remember, there's huge corruption charges that he avoided by rewriting the basic law to do away with an independent judiciary. He's the man who said, I am Mr. Security, but he was asleep on October 7th. So is his army. So is his government. Israel is a nation that is in absolute chaos because of the incompetence of Bibi Netanyahu. They aren't winning anything. They're losing everything. This is a huge victory for Hamas.
I just this weekend finished rereading the 9/11 Commission report. Went back to that, going back through Richard Clarke's testimony, going back through the months leading up to what happened on 9/11. Security information being handed to the highest levels, to Condi Rice, etc. And it was fascinating to go back to that and think in terms of what we're seeing right now in Israel. Do you draw, I mean, you were there in the heat of it all. Do you draw any parallels, what happened on 9/11 ahead of time, but the ideology and what happened before October 7th?
The problem is I don't think, I mean, first of all, there is an absolute parallel between the failure of intelligence. We know, for instance, on 9/11 that we were collecting adequate information to draw a conclusion that al-Qaeda was preparing to attack us. The CIA even put a presidential daily briefing in front of the president saying that very thing. But the failure was a lack of imagination on the part of the politicians who didn't want to undertake the difficult decisions, to act on this information. The Israelis were collecting all the information. Every tactical collector will tell you, we were reporting up the chain of command that Hamas is getting ready to do something, that Hamas is, something's happening. They even knew the date. On the night of October 7th, October 6th, October 7th, the senior Israeli leadership was meeting, the head of intelligence, head of the military, because they had reports from Israeli intelligence that Hamas is coming over that night. They're like, what do we do? Do we call the alarm? Well, at a minimum, what you do is you call the frontline troops and say, stand to, stand to. I mean, get everybody out, put them in their gear, get them online, get them ready, get the spotlights out. The enemy's coming over the fence. It's time to repel borders. They're like, no, don't raise the alarm. We'll talk about it in the morning. Well, they were talking about it in the morning, but they were talking about it a different way because it became true. They were taken by surprise. That's the failure. The big Israeli problem was that they had fooled themselves into believing that Hamas was incapable of launching this kind of attack, that Hamas had bought into the notion of governance. Well, Hamas was governing. What does a government do? Clayton, I mean, this is just a simple question. What does a government do when their people are oppressed, when their people are tortured, when their people are bombed, when their people are arrested, raped, murdered? A government stands up and defends them. So Hamas is a government dedicated to serving the population that elected them in. And that service is to liberate them from the Israeli oppressor. What happened on October 7th was the purest form of governance, because it was a government stepping in and standing up and fighting on behalf of an oppressed people against an occupier that refuses to change the way it does business.
And now, and I'll get you out here on this, Scott, which is the total destruction of Gaza. So, images being shared this morning showing the comparison between Hiroshima and Gaza, and you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference when you look at these images. I mean, what's what city's what, and now the millions. There's all sorts of plans and rumors and speculation, I guess, but different plans that have emerged. 500,000 to Canada. Being pushed out into Ireland, into the deserts. Will the Palestinian people ever come back to the Gaza Strip, or is this done?
I don't think the Palestinian people are leaving Gaza. I think they're there to stay. I think the Palestinian people would rather have all 2 million of them die under Israeli bombs than be turned into a diaspora. That is a defeat for Palestine, because once you leave, you will never come back. You will never come back because the world doesn't care about you. The only reason why the world is talking about Palestine today is because Hamas attacked on October 7th. And the only reason why the world has turned on Israel is because the Palestinian people have stood there and say, bring it on. We got this. Yeah, they cry. Who doesn't cry when your children are slaughtered and butchered? But these aren't the people who are surrendering. These are people who are becoming stronger and stronger and stronger in the face of the Israeli aggression. The Palestinian people won't leave Gaza. It is Palestine, by the way, because to do so is the defeat of their cause. They are committing some of the greatest acts of bravery by refusing to yield to Israel. People blame Hamas, but stop blaming Hamas. Start blaming Israel. Hamas isn't dropping the bombs, Israel is. Hamas is standing up for the rights of the Palestinian people. It's Israel that oppresses these rights. For people to sit here and blame this on the people of Palestine, you're being used as human shields. You can't be used as a human shield in your own home. In your own home that has been occupied by Israel, dominated by Israel. You aren't a human shield. You are a prisoner in an open air concentration camp. So no, I don't think you're going to see anybody. Look, even the King of Jordan, who is as closely linked to Israel as you can possibly imagine, has said that the eviction of the population from Gaza would be tantamount to a declaration of war, and Jordan would treat it as such. Israel has lost, Clayton. There will be a lot of fighting left. There will be a lot of destruction. There will be a lot more death. But Israel can't flip the script on this. They have gone down a path that inevitably leads to their defeat. The question is how great this defeat will be. Because at the end of the day, there's going to be a Palestinian state. The longer Israel continues this conflict, the less control they'll have at the negotiating table where a Palestinian state is created, because the scope and scale of their defeat and their humiliation would become apparent to all. The big thing that Israel has going for it is the mythology of Israeli exceptionalism, the mythology of Israeli superiority, the mythology of an Israel that cannot fail. Well, there ain't nothing exceptional about an Israeli. They die just like everybody else. There is no superiority here. They have the greatest technology in the world, and they're getting slapped around by Hamas and by Hezbollah. And the notion that Israel is too big to fail, they're failing right now. This could be the end of of political Zionism if Netanyahu continues to sail Israel down these stormy waters. It could be very, very bad for Israel in the future.
Yeah, we'll see if he survives. It doesn't look likely. Yeah, you great point. And during wartime, I think George W. Bush had 91% approval rating. Imagine Yankee Stadium standing up in a massive standing ovation after he throws out a first pitch after 9/11. Imagine that happening today. Imagine that happening to Benjamin Netanyahu. I can't picture it. I couldn't picture that with President Biden right now either.
No.
He'd be booed out of Yankee Stadium. Scott Ritter, always great to see you. Thank you so much for your insights as always. And this is an unbelievable. I want to have you on as regularly as I can, because we're watching this sort of minute to minute, and I think your analysis is absolutely spot on. And I thank you. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
I don't think I've heard anyone say that he thinks there will be a statehood resolution after this.
Well, I mean, that's a great question. Will there be a two-state solution? Will there be a one-state solution? And I think, or will there be no state at all? And I mean, I think right now, without having with what unfolds in Gaza over the next few weeks here, with this sort of 90-day timeline that Scott was just sort of talking about with supplies and whatnot, and they've really united the entire Arab world around this. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen here? Is there going to be no Palestinian state? They're going to be living in tents in the Egyptian desert? Is that where they're going to be? Are they going to be in Canada? 500,000, which is the plan being drawn up to have 500,000 Palestinians move to Canada, the Justin Trudeau government. We're going to talk about that on the show tomorrow. So where will Palestine be? Will it be in Palestine on those lands, or is it going to be in Canada? Is it going to be in the United States? Where will 2.3 million people go? And who's going to be willing to transport those individuals?
Well, his
and move?
prediction is that there will be a two-state solution inside the borders that are currently Israel. And I think that that's a bold prediction. I'd have to think more deeply about how viable that's been, because I was reading a book this weekend by...
I mean, that's the plan all along, right? This is the plan all along. That
it's something that leaders in Palestinian regions have been promising their people for so long.
That's what the United Nations
these empty promises have, bred extremism, because people just don't believe it anymore after 75 years.
And by the way, we should be very, very clear. No one on this show here at Redacted supports what happened on October 7th. I think we've said that 30 times now. War is never the answer. Killing people is never the answer. We are pro-peace.
Or stealing people, or anything involving civilians at all.
Sex trafficking, slavery, oppression of human beings. I believe we are all equal, and so no one here supports what happened on October 7th. No one supports what's happening right now, and we absolutely think that there should be a ceasefire, and people should come to the table and save lives. So that's where we stand on this.
Yes.
It's that, and also it's like there's so much of this, like, people, when war breaks out like this, and if you go back and try to look at why it happened, people want to react as though the war just spontaneously happened. And wars don't spontaneously happen. There's always a reason behind it. Right. And you can track this back decades. And so it's like going back and looking at those decades doesn't mean we support one side or the other. It's like, I'm very anti-war, but I also need to understand why it's going on and to take it into actual context of what's really going on and why.
Go ahead.
Well, that's a great way to prevent future wars, but our inability to do that has brought us more wars.
And I just want to say something about the people that watch this show, the audience here that is open to ideas and different viewpoints. That's why you watch this show, right? If you come with like a preset notion, a preset core group of emotions and narratives that a conviction
bias.
Yeah, you come in with a conviction bias and something sort of shatters your worldview or runs up against your worldview. I know that can be very uncomfortable. Like, we used to have a tagline here on the show, which was, let's get uncomfortable, because you should be uncomfortable with things that you might not have heard before, and you're opening your eyes to it and you allow these opinions. It doesn't mean you have to hate on someone. But let me be clear about something. I know this was the case when we cover Ukraine. We absolutely have intelligence state people in the chat room. And we know that there are bot armies who have been created absolutely on Ukraine and now on the Mossad side with Israel. So when you see brand new accounts that are popping up on YouTube, they haven't really been, or they have old accounts that they're resurrecting and using, and they post random comments really quickly in chat rooms, please be aware of what's happening, okay? Open your eyes to when you see trolls, a sudden surge in trolls, please, you're not an idiot. You know exactly what's happening. And there's been a number of reports about this happening over the past few weeks. You think like the Ukrainian army of internet bots that they had set up by the CIA was strong? You have not met the Mossad Israeli side of this. I'm telling you, it is massive. So what you're seeing when you see a lot of trolls suddenly popping up in comments and they appear to be real people, they're not. Just open your eyes to that, folks. Go ahead, David.
Well, and I just want to say, like, it's like AI. Like, after you start to identify the things that show you that something is AI versus real, you know, like the little thing, like extra fingers and all that stuff. Once you notice the troll accounts and how they're talking and what they're saying and the way that they structure their usernames, then it will become more clear to you. So just learn that first. Learn to spot them, and then you'll start to see them more and more, and you'll start to identify which people are or which bots are bots and which aren't.
Yeah, exactly. AI, etc. So, yeah.
And we're not here to dig our heels in for any government.
No, because in fact, we have a whole story coming up here in just a moment about how the media is totally ignoring all of the pro-peace Jews out there who don't want war and who want a solution to this. Why is the media hiding that there are a lot of Jews, tens of thousands, who've come out to these protests? Why is the media ignoring that?
Well, this is not new. Since the 1970s, there was a post-Zionist academic and movement, and also an artistry movement of people who wanted to make movies and books and paintings to dismantle the Zionist narrative of a people without a land and a land without a people, and went through early documents of Jewish arrival back in Jerusalem in the 1920s. And those academics were either silenced or chased out of Israel and called self-hating Jews or Holocaust deniers. That's a lot of the history of those terms came from people who were self-reflective post-Zionist academics.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about all of that in a second. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Bank on Yourself, because are you being lied to? Wall Street tells you that if you follow their investment advice, you'll... do you want to talk? Yeah, okay, let's do that. Wall Street tells you that if you follow their investment advice, you'll retire in a lower tax bracket, yet many retirees who follow their advice are finding themselves in the highest tax bracket of their lives. But there is another way. Bank on Yourself is a better way to grow and protect your hard-earned money. This retirement plan alternative has never had a losing year in over 160 years. It's guaranteed predictable growth in retirement income. With Bank on Yourself, your plan doesn't go backwards when the markets tumble. Your principal and growth are locked in, and you're in control. You get access to your money for any purpose at any time with no questions asked, without government penalties or restrictions on how much income you can take or when you can take it. Try doing that with a Roth IRA or a Roth or an IRA or a 401k. You just can't. The rules are too strict. And if you're caught commingling your money or using that money, you're in deep doo-doo. So this is the strategy that famous businesses like McDonald's have used, and almost anyone can do it. It's built-in inflation protection. So if you want guaranteed predictable annual growth, control of your money, and tax-free retirement, then go to bankonyourself.com/redacted, and you'll get a free report with a proven retirement plan alternative the banks and Wall Street are desperately hoping that you don't hear about. So hear about it. Explore it for yourself. Go to bankonyourself.com/redacted for your free report. One more time, that's bankonyourself.com/redacted.
Chrissy A in our chat says, I ordered my magnesium and it's helping me. Thank you, Redacted.
Oh, it's great.
That's awesome, Chrissy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take some
stuff.
tonight too after the show and feeling as sick as I am. So gonna hit the sack.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. If you subscribe to the channel, your name pops up here on the big board. So thank you when you subscribe. And it also pops up with our new graphics as well. So thank you guys for that. And thank you to hitting a new record number of subscribers here on the channel. We really appreciate that this past week. So thank you guys all for subscribing and seeking the truth with us. We don't have all the answers. We are just simply asking questions. When the media shoves narratives down our throats, we should all be questioning things. And we are navigating this crazy clown world together. So thank you guys for joining us.
All right, well, Ukrainian President Zelensky is on a literal warpath trying to get the world to turn the cameras back on him. Over here, guys. Well, will it work, or is he on permanent B-list status for warmongers now that the world is so hyped up over Israel and the conflict with the Palestinians? Maybe all the air has gone out of Zelensky's green room. But is the war in Ukraine something still that the West even wants? Now that it's got what seems to be a more attention-getting one. This one is a little bit more popular, I would say. Definitely more of a money-making enterprise for powerful people, this new war, I would say. Well, I think the media is hedging its best, if media coverage of Ukraine over the weekend is any indication. NBC this weekend reported that U.S. and European officials have been quietly talking Ukraine into peace negotiations with Russia. Now, not only is this because of the pitiful state of the war right now, but also because the world maybe can only have one popular war at a time. That's why, Marvel movies don't go up against each other in the same weekend, right? It's the same thing. Here's what NBC says, that there is unease in the U.S. government. Now there's unease. It's been comfortable up until then. With how much less public attention the war in Ukraine has garnered since the Israel-Hamas war began. I mean, it's literally like, Julia Roberts out, Kate Winslet in. That's the way, it's so depressing, the way that this is presented to us as like, you know what I mean?
Right.
It says officials fear that the shift could make securing additional aid for Kiev more difficult. Some U.S. military officials have privately begun using the term stalemate to describe this battle. Some saying it may come down to which side can maintain a military force the longest. Well, we know that because Ukraine's side is funded by us. If we don't fund it any longer, that's an easy equation. This is like SAT question, you guys. The side with zero money is the side that does not last. Officials have also privately said that Ukraine likely only has until the end of the year or shortly thereafter before more urgent discussions about peace should begin. U.S. officials have shared their views on such with European allies, officials said. So let's just quickly check in on the state of that counteroffensive because it's still going on. Here is the map on the left of June 2023 when the counteroffensive, when we were told it began. The red there is Russian territory now. That was once Ukraine. Those areas there voted to become a part of Russia, asked Russia to come in and protect them. Russia did. They voted to join them. Russia's holding the line. Ukraine is throwing human lives against that line like a fly zapper, and people are dying like crazy to regain a territory that does not want to be Ukraine. So in the several months since the counteroffensive began, look at the map on the right, hasn't gone well, looks the same. The counteroffensive cost thousands of lives, several dozens of thousands, but regained almost no territory. Now, Ukraine said that this counteroffensive, they said not that it would take back all of that land because they knew that was impossible, but that it would put them in a better negotiation position. Do you recall that?
Right.
That was literally what President Biden said, what Antony Blinken said, and what Zelensky said, that it would put them in a better position to negotiate peace. Not only did that plan not work out because they've taken back no territory and lost thousands and thousands of lives, but Zelensky seems woefully unaware that it didn't work. No apology. We took all your money and weapons. A lot of people died. We didn't get anywhere. Sorry about that. No, none whatsoever. He rejected over the weekend. On Meet the Press, he said he doesn't think this is a stalemate, and he continued to ask for more weapons, particularly air defense and fighter jets. Now, about those weapons, over the weekend, Russia said that it launched at least 15 multiple launch strikes. Now, this is Russian media, TASS, on Ukrainian military targets. They said that just in the past week, look at that number there, 1,340 people have died. In just the last week, while we've been looking at Israel, these Ukrainian lives continue to be thrown up against this line.
An entire award ceremony was decimated. So some Ukrainian commander thought it was a smart idea to grab a bunch of Ukrainians and hold an award ceremony near one of the front lines. And the Russians knew exactly what was happening and took them all out. They gathered up for an award ceremony. The Russians knew exactly what was happening, and they were gone on the front lines. So an entire section just wiped out. Jeez. And this is happening routinely. And of course, it's now buried in the headlines.
Yeah.
And you're not going to hear about it. And this is why Washington is like, hey, can we get out of this thing?
Right.
Can we run the other way now? We got our friends in Israel.
I mean, it would have been nice if we ran the other way before those dozens of thousands of people. Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, I was like, I kind of agree with him that it's not a stalemate because that's not how stalemate works. It's like Russia took an amount of territory that they wanted to take, and then they're sitting there, and Ukraine is trying to take it back. Ukraine is failing to take it back. A stalemate would be that neither side can move forward or back.
Right.
Where, you know, there is no winner. But Russia's not trying to do anything else.
No,
at this point, they're just defending the territory they took.
It's like a massive wall
because the border hasn't moved.
Yeah, it's like a massive wall, and you just keep throwing bodies at it. You keep throwing people into the meat grinder. So it's not a stalemate at all. And I think the chat agrees with you, Philip, on this. A stalemate is like World War I trench warfare, where for months and months and months there's absolutely no movement at all, and people just die of trench foot and die of consumption and die of gas attacks. But there's no movement on the front lines at all.
Right.
Nothing. And here, they're just waiting with their arms crossed while they just keep throwing young Ukrainian men and older Ukrainian men who are dying in droves. And you're literally wiping out an entire country, NATO. Way to go. Remember, this is NATO's war.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because he said, like, look, we're dying for you, but if you don't protect us, this war will move throughout other NATO countries, and then you NATO countries will have to put your sons and daughters up in a draft. He literally said draft. So I think, the moral dilemma he's presenting us with is, let us die, otherwise you will. On a soul level, that's really an unethical bargain. But I guess that's what he thinks of us, that we're okay with them dying as long as we don't have to. But Zelensky's still positive, bordering on manic about the war keeping the war going. He said this on Meet the Press over the weekend. This is a really confusing explanation he's going to give us about how he's not going to talk to Russia. He's basically like, hey, I don't answer those texts. I leave them unread. There's still a bubble next to them. I'm not going to do it. And here's why. It's very hard to follow his logic, but I guess try.
And when this focus to the Middle East, and when they try to divide the world in this crisis, Israel-Palestine crisis, and of course, Russia is very happy with this war. They don't count how many children were killed there. They don't think about the flag or nationality. We saw some moments, their attitude. We saw what was in Makhachkala in Dagestan. This is the part of Russia. This is what the biggest wave of anti-Semitism. So what they want? They just want to divide the world, to take focus from Ukraine to another war. And if it will not be enough for them, I'm again repeating, and I'm repeating in these 2 years, if it will be not enough for them, it will not be enough. Because Syria was not enough. They began in Ukraine. After Ukraine, in the Middle East, they will continue their plan. And you see that Iran is supporting them, in Ukraine is supporting them with the weapon, and now in the Middle East again.
Okay.
Wow,
so
brilliant.
That was like war bingo.
He and Kamala Harris should go on tour together and give speeches. Yeah. Can you imagine that?
Okay.
The
so
incoherent tour.
If you had a war bingo card and you had Syria and the Middle East and Russia, then, Ukraine is the free spot, right? That's what he's trying to say, is Ukraine has to be in the center. So since Russia is anti-Semitic, and they want more anti-Semitism because of the airport attack in Dagestan, that's like saying everywhere that there is anti-Semitism is an anti-Semitic country. As Americans, I hope we reject that, because we're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, and I don't want that to be our national identity. We should reject that. So because Russia supported Syria and Iran hates Israel and Israel likes Russia, therefore come on back to Ukraine. Got it?
Yeah.
As the centerpiece of war bingo.
Move back to Ukraine. That's a great center of...
No, he did literally make the point that, like, people are coming back here because we have a growing economy, because
of BlackRock.
Because of U.S. investments, right?
He's like, look, you can look past the fact that we are Ukraine and we applaud Nazis, right? We have standing ovations for Nazi war heroes in Canada, and we applaud that. Like, look past that. If you're Jewish, come here. We'll pretend that like that never even happened, right? Come here. We've got investment happening, and we've got agriculture.
And I want to point out, too, that I feel like we have to be careful with the narrative of all these dead Ukrainians, because I don't know if you noticed, but over the weekend, I saw some journalists in journalist gear, like Fox News in Israel, on the ground with their helmets and all the other stuff, covering this. And we don't see that in Ukraine because I don't believe that that narrative exists. Because if there were Ukrainians dying in mass like they say they are, they would be there covering it so that more people would be supportive of it.
Civilians.
They would have been covering it all along.
Civilians.
So I just kind of,
right.
Civilians you're talking about.
I'm talking about anybody, even if the soldiers were dying in mass in Ukraine, that they'd be covering it more because it would fall into the narrative they're wanting us to think that Russia is just taking over Ukraine.
It is interesting.
But we don't see journalists there.
You bring up a great point because the coverage of Ukrainian soldiers being killed, well, Ukraine has not allowed reporters to go to the front lines. So we know that.
Right.
CNN confirmed that. CNN confirmed that.
If they
and
were
MSNBC
dying,
confirmed that. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to go to the front lines. But so that's an interesting question. Why? Because they wanted you as an American to believe that Ukraine is beating Russia, right? That no, they're not losing men. No, they're fine. That we need to keep sending weapons. They're not losing to Russia. So they had that narrative from the beginning. We're not going to show the Ukrainians being killed.
Well, Antony Blinken gave us a tour recently of graveyards. So at least we see vast swaths of cemeteries, but we don't know, right? We only get to see it if it fits the narrative. When they
when they change the narrative, they're like, okay, we need to now show. I guess we need to now start showing graves, and now we need there to be the sympathy tour. The sympathy tour.
Yeah, and in Israel, it follows the narrative, so they're able to put journalists on the ground there because it's like, hey, this fits. We can actually show that there's attacks happening. They've got proof, so it completes the narrative. So it's like, yes, journalists on the ground.
Wait, what's Philip trying to say, please?
Sorry, I'm just saying they're spinning both records. They're spinning both stories. They're and it's the problem. I think it's the confusion with the war in Ukraine is they're like, Ukraine is winning. They can't possibly lose to Russia because Russia's an inferior force. And we put all this money into Ukraine that they can't possibly lose. They're doing amazing. This counteroffensive is doing amazing, and they're losing hundreds of thousands of people. And they're pulling both narratives to like pull on all the heartstrings at once. But then it's like they don't even care anymore that it's a confusing narrative, that they're saying both stories.
They don't expect us to be smart enough to see that, Philip. So stop being so smart.
I mean, early on it was Ukrainians are not being killed. A Ukrainian grandmother is so skilled that she can shoot down Russian jets with like her drone or whatever. You know, like that's the kind of stories we were hearing. The Ghost of Kiev, right? The Snake Island. Yeah. Tell those Russians to go F themselves, and then we're going to shoot them, and that none of that stuff ever happened. And Ukrainians aren't being killed.
Right. If it was really happening, we wouldn't have been covering stories where they had to have bodies laying there that got up after they drove past. Right. There would have actually been bodies.
Actors laying on the floors. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, in fact, Zelensky, let's go back around to his media tour because it's just not going so well. You recall he was canceled from a speech from European Parliament in October, and then he tried to make an offer to go to Israel, and the Israeli government said, not right now, we're kind of busy. He made another attempt at a trip to Israel, and that was leaked to the press, and the trip may be canceled again. Here's from the Times of Israel that they say the Zelensky visit now up in the air after a leak to Israeli TV because he really wanted to bring the optics of himself in the center of this war, to bring himself back to the epicenter of all, like I said, World of Warcraft. So Zelensky has also said that Russia is dominating the skies in this war. So that's why he needs more fighter jets. But Ukraine is doing a great job in the sea, he says. In the Black Sea, we're good there. That's where we're dominating. Okay, interesting, because Russia this week launched this video saying that they have successfully tested a ballistic missile that traveled several thousand kilometers away from its launch from a nuclear-powered submarine. That's not a territory I'd like to play in, but they still, I guess, feel confident. Now, NBC asked President Zelensky about President Trump's assertion that he'd be able to end the war in 24 hours. Here's what Zelensky had to say about that.
President Trump, who is the GOP frontrunner, has said that if he is reelected, he could end this war in 24 hours. What is your reaction and message to former President Trump about that?
Former President Trump said that about 24 hours that he can manage it and finish the war. For me, what can I say? So he's very welcome, first of all. President Biden was here, and I think he understood some details, which you can understand only being here. So I invite President Trump, if he can come here, I will need 24 minutes. Yes, 24 minutes, not more. А пояснити, yes, not more, 24 minutes to explain President Trump that he can't manage this war. He can't bring peace because of the Putin. But always have if he's not trying, and if he's not ready to give our territory for this terrible man, for the Putin. If you are not ready to give it, if you are not ready to give our independence, he can't manage it. Yes.
The Putin.
Yes. Okay.
Well, I can't clean my room because of the Putin.
We're calling him the Putin now, like The Rock or the dude.
The dude abides.
The dude abides. Yeah.
The Putin abides. I can't clean my room tonight. I can't do the dishes tonight because of the Putin.
Yeah.
That'll be my new excuse.
All right. Also, Trump or any other politician cannot end the war if they cannot refuse funding for the war. It's really he or she who holds the purse strings who will be able to end the war. He's saying if they don't give us our independency, well, Ukraine is independent right now. They are not financially independent. They can still be sovereign if they negotiate those red borders that we talked about before, leave those people as they are, as they voted. Ukraine is independent. You can remain. You can walk away, have plenty of people who either will or will not vote for you. The problem is he's canceled elections, so he doesn't have any consequence right now. And if the war ends, he will face the ballot box. So now Zelensky, he threw in a little flattery of President Biden, hoping that this would go a long way for President Biden's election campaign and maybe to curry back favor with the Biden administration. Watch.
By the way, he was here, and I think he's strong man. And he was in historical moment. He's a hero because he was in those moments under Russian missile attack. But he was here, and he understood more about Ukraine. Yes, he knew Ukraine even before this invasion. Yes.
Okay, that's total bullshit.
Which bullshit?
The Biden.
There's been so much.
I know there's so much bullshit there. Let's dig it out.
That he's strong.
Okay, that's total bullshit. Yeah, that Biden's,
he's a strong man.
Biden's a strong man. Okay, no, that Biden is so brave. He came to Kiev when he was under attack by Russian missiles.
Yes, that's bullshit.
Right now, I did a whole takedown of that BS on the show when that happened about a year ago because they had a secret back channel discussion with Moscow. Said Biden's flying to Kiev. And through their intermediaries, we're like, yeah, we're not going to do anything. Like, we're not going to do anything. Don't worry. There's no attacks coming of Kiev. We promise you, nothing like that's going to happen.
There has not been for nearly 2 years.
And there hasn't been. And so when Biden was walking across the promenade there, they sounded the air raid alarms for fakery, for theater, for propaganda. There was no attack. They ran the air raid sirens. They're like, look, Biden's under attack by Putin. Literally at the moment that he's walking with Zelensky. Like the timing is amazing.
Yeah.
So what a brave man he is.
And a strong man. It's, like when an elderly gentleman brags about how much they can eat because they're still so virile.
Yeah.
He's in good shape.
It's like those CNN reporters that put on the hard hat helmets and they jump down in like ditches, nowhere near. They're like, we're under attack. And then there's like kids playing on their bikes, riding by like in the background. He's a strong man. Okay. Go ahead, Philip. Sorry.
Oh, I hope we're now going to start seeing the Biden like AI, like where he's all beefy and like buff, like you ever see the Trump memes that go around where people for whatever reason will like make these pictures of Trump where he's like just
Rambo.
Jacked. Like I want to see those from Biden now too and see how they just put them side by side.
Hasn't anyone done that? Like,
I don't know that anyone wants to see that.
Biden on the Peloton.
A beefy Biden. No one wants to see that.
I don't know.
No one wants to see that.
If you've been around for a while, when I first started doing Redacted, like in the first month, I got a high five on Peloton from Joseph Biden. And I'm pretty sure it was like a verified account. So, I wonder if he's still hopping on the Peloton as a strong man.
No choice.
I don't know. I am no longer on Peloton. Don't try and find me there. You can't high-five me, but you can high-five us here. You can also hit like on this video. You can share it with your friends. You can subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. We've got more news to get to. Coming up, we're going to talk about the post-Zionist movement. We're going to talk about people who are Jewish and not Zionists. We're going to talk about what that even means, it to be a peace-loving Jew. That's a possibility. We're going to talk about all the flavors that are available to all members of society, and especially the peace-loving ones. Do you want to say something first?
I do, because someone just asked, thank you, Anwar, in our chat for our $4.99 super chat. Just said, I'm sorry, I'm just joining. Have you guys discussed the presence of the Ohio-class submarine in the Mediterranean yet? No, we didn't talk about that exclusively or specifically here on the show, but yes, that happened on November 5th. The Ohio-class submarine arrived in the United States Central Command area, basically of responsibility. And what that basically means is, according to the Law of Discoveries Authority, is that the Central Command Authority, because I was reading all about this last night, I was trying to really, like, how does this change things? It's a strategic moves that they say carries significant implications under international law, particularly the United States nation and their convention on the law of the sea, basically. So putting an Ohio-class submarine in these waters is a first and a big change. So we're going to keep our eye on that, and we're going to be talking to some military strategists on that. So thank you for your super chat. But that's a big deal. Yeah. So if you think things aren't changing right now, and these pieces on the chessboard aren't moving, they are, and it's very, very scary what's unfolding right before our eyes, unfortunately.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the Zionist movement that we just spoke about. We're also going to talk about the lack of freedom of speech in Europe. Extremely concerning. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Indeed, because the thing about running your own business is that every single hire counts, and no hiring partner understands that like Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. So don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you'll get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Now, Indeed knows when you're growing your business, you have to make every dollar count. So that's why you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job restrictions. Indeed knows, again, that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. So visit Indeed.com/redacted right now to start hiring and let them know that we sent you. Again, that's Indeed.com/redacted. Indeed.com/redacted. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. If you need to hire, you need Indeed.
All right, see if I don't cough during this next segment here. So here, we'll get a little swig of... And if you guys subscribe to the channel, your name will pop up here. Thank you, guys. We had a record number of new subscribers.
Last week?
Yeah, over the
past... When I was alone?
No, over the past...
When you were off the show?
It was weird. As soon as I came back, we got a whole bunch of new subscribers. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate that. Really great to see all of you guys.
I did fixate over, our average viewers. And I'm like, okay, so there's probably, I broke it down in thirds. Like maybe there's a third that like Clayton and a third that like me and a third that like us together. So yeah. I should not fixate on this. We just got to bring you our best show. But that shows me that I'm still like a fifth grader who wants to be liked.
I have 12 fans too.
Yes.
I have 12. So.
Yes, and so does Philip, and so does Grim, and so do our dogs. But no, nice to see the close to 35,000 of you across all of our platforms. You're watching us live tonight, 35,000 of you watching us live. That's bigger than some concerts in big arenas. So thank you guys for seeking the truth with us. Again, we don't have all the answers. We are seeking the truth here together and navigating this crazy clown world. Our motto, our pronouns are question everything. What are your pronouns? Let us know in the comments below. All right. Why is the mainstream media hiding the fact that thousands upon thousands of Jews have joined together with pro-Palestinian protests to say enough is enough, end this war, end the killing, end the fighting? Some are organized. Some, and actually many more, of course, are not organized. They're coming out and they're calling for a ceasefire. I find this fascinating. It's almost like the mainstream news media has an agenda, doesn't want you to know about it. The mainstream media wants you to believe that all Jews are fine with the destruction of Gaza, and they are going after Hamas because of what happened on October 7th, and everyone is unified. They won't even show you really the protests in Israel out in front of Benjamin Netanyahu's offices, right? Everyone's unified, and all Jews are pro going into Gaza, pro going after Hamas. That's it. No, there's no gray area here at all.
No diversity of thought.
Yeah, no diversity of thought. That's how the mainstream media wants you to think about this. And that everyone is going to these protests, by the way, are all pro-Hamas. So everyone going to these protests are terrorists or I don't know, they're pro-Hamas, they're anti-Semites. So that's who's going to these protests. That's how the mainstream media is portraying this with all these anti-Semitic slogans. And yes, there have been plenty of anti-Semitic slogans at these protests. There's been vile things said about Jews at these protests. We've covered them. There's been a lot of that. So there's no hiding of what's been said. There's been swastikas showing up at these protests. I saw one picture of one guy with a phone with his swastika held up during one of these pro-Palestinian protests. Of course, the media zeroed right in on that guy, right? But why do you think they're not
out of Trudeau's book?
Right, exactly. So why do you? I'll ask this in the comments though. Why do you think they're portraying it this way? I mean, I don't have the answers, so I'm just throwing it out to you guys. Why do you think the media is portraying it this way? We'll let you decide on this. We're not going to force it down your throats. You guys make your own decisions about this. But we want to shine a light on this story because the mainstream media is ignoring it for some reason, and I find it fascinating. And that's what we do here on Redacted: is cover the stories the mainstream media ignores. So this weekend, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, from India to London to America, all over, came out to protest the war and demand a ceasefire to stop the horrific killing of civilians. And yes, I will even make fun of a protester calling for anti-war who is wearing a mask outside. But to read the headlines and watch the coverage, you think it's only Palestinians who came to a protest. Or as some news outlets called them, pro-Hamas protests. They literally labeled them pro-Hamas protests. That's it. It's Arabs versus Jews, and there's no gray area whatsoever. There can't possibly be Jews that don't want the destruction of all of Palestine or all Palestinians to be killed and pushed out of the Gaza Strip. Oh, but there are.
We have one on our show all the time. Meet Dan Cohen.
Yeah, the others exactly. And many are organized. And again, many are not organized. And here's just a small sampling from this weekend of some of these protests, Jewish Americans and others against the war coming out to these protests that the media has ignored.
I'm a Jewish person. I am totally anti-Zionist on principle. Zionism is a racist, settler, colonial ideology that is responsible for 75 years of brutality and that is responsible for producing the resistance against it. I just tell people there's nothing anti-Semitic about calling for equality. What's anti-Semitic about saying all people deserve to be treated equally? That's what this movement is about, right? The call for a free Palestine from the river to the sea is the call for equal rights for everybody. The complete opposite of what the Israeli regime has been about for 75 years.
So that river to the sea comment, ooh, could really come back to haunt that guy, right? That's what people describe as a terrorist comment, right? He's calling for there. He's calling basically for terrorism from the river to the sea.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's a phrase born out of Yasser Arafat's era, of course, in the 1960s. And it's a phrase that refers to having a free Palestine from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea.
Oh.
Under basically what the United Nations had laid out, essentially, the connection between those points, where you would have this sort of strip of land right through the middle of what is now Israel, but what was Palestine. But this area would be for Palestinians, and of course it was rejected. And, you know, we can go down that rabbit hole.
Well,
but anyway, that's where that comes from, of course. But that's being labeled by some, if you hear that being shouted at a rally, that's a call for terrorism. That's
Okay.
a call for terrorism. That's a call for the
Clearly
eradication
he
of
was
Jews.
meaning it as
a Jew.
a two-state solution.
Yes.
That's
or
what he...
an adherence to the Oslo Accords. I don't know what was in his mind, and I'm not going to speak for that gentleman. Or an adherence to the United Nations after World War II and what the plan was. So maybe that's what he's referring to. I don't exactly know, but certainly not what it looks like today.
Can we have a little bit of a talk, though, about the definition of Zionism, though? Because I think it means different things to different people. For some, it just means Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. I think that's a very distracting question, whether or not Israel should exist. For others, it means pro-Netanyahu government, right? And others, I just think that it's thrown around in a strange way because, and then it becomes a way that, either that is thrown against anti-Semitism. Like, I don't think the two things go.
Well, they're conflating.
Right.
So the major problem that people are doing right now today is that they're conflating anti-Zionism, political Zionism, and they're conflating it with anti-Semitism. And this is where people go off the rails, right? So you have Jews who were, in concentration camps in Auschwitz. You had Jews who escaped from Auschwitz, who then went to their Zionist leaders, went to the heads of the Jewish leadership in Hungary and in Budapest and other areas, and reported what was happening at Auschwitz. We just got out of there. We're the first two Jews to ever escape. Hundreds of thousands more Jews are going to be killed. You need to stop this. But the Zionists, of course, had collaborated with the Nazis to protect themselves, to build power. Well known that they've collaborated with the Nazis. It is highly documented. I'm the first
They
to say
had a
this.
shared goal of the exodus of Jews from Eastern Europe in order to establish a state inside Jerusalem. So in and around Jerusalem.
So, and in fact, the Jews that escaped from Auschwitz said that they felt that the Zionists were just as contemptible as the Nazis because they did nothing, and they collaborated with the Jews. They collaborated with the Nazis to kill hundreds of thousands of Jews in the concentration camps, specifically at Auschwitz is what I'm referring to from that example.
Well, I just would like to put a little context on this anti-Zionism, because there was in the 70s and 80s a post-Zionist academic movement. There's a great book about this called The Idea of Israel by Ilan Pappé. And what he says is that academics, historians, anthropologists, artists, filmmakers all had this movement to basically what the United States has done is reconcile our history of slavery and admit it as a part of that, to dismantle the Zionist narrative that that land was just there and waiting for them in order to create a peaceful existence. That's the reason for this. Now, this was very much shut down by the Israeli government. Those academics either had a full-on mea culpa turnaround like Benny Morris, or were expelled from Israel or felt chased out of Israel. And so that is where the government started using this term self-hating Jew for these people who just wanted to reconcile this past and create a peaceful solution for the future. And also the idea of Holocaust deniers, because they wanted to not deny that the Holocaust happened, but acknowledged the Zionist collaboration in it. And that is because otherwise, most of you might think like, who denies the Holocaust, right? That is a very powerful term to put down this academic movement that the Israeli government did not want, the conversation they never wanted to have, and now we're having it.
EL, thank you for your super chat, says EL Herzog in the super chat says, Israelis are unified in their determination to destroy Hamas, not to kill all Palestinians. Maybe you should tell that to some of the leadership, by the way, similar to how the Allies were determined to destroy the Nazis, but not all Germans. Okay, I take your point. That's interesting to hear that. I don't know that we can ever paint one people with one, like they're all unified against this.
Sure.
They all feel this way. Like, have you asked all 5 million of them? Like, that's how you feel? Because there's a hell of a lot of people right now protesting for Netanyahu to resign. So it seems like there's a pretty big conflict as far as what people believe in Israel right now. And not everyone's on the same page with everything, but I'd love to hear. We've certainly featured interviews from people here who think that all Palestinians, regardless of Hamas affiliation, should be wiped off the face of the earth. That they are human animals. They're basically animals. That's the reference. So are those people, how do those people, how do you square that, like those different viewpoints on that? I don't like painting everybody with one broad brush like that.
Right. And the people who do not support a ceasefire because of this appetite for killing Hamas, I really want to know how then you reconcile the fact that it's become so much more violent than that. Is that still okay for this end goal? Right. Yeah. And when I have conversations with people about this, can't support a ceasefire because we must put down Hamas, my answer is I'm never going to be convinced that bombs and weapons are the answer. I just won't. So that's one bit of it. But also our history on the war on terror over the last 3 decades has shown us that anytime you try and stamp up terror, you inspire others. And so until we get to the root of this, we just have a warring planet. And that, I guess, is what we're agreeing to.
So these Jews believe the real enemy of Israel are the corrupt Zionist leaders. That's who's been showing up to these protests. And these anti-Zionist Jews are showing up all over these protests. And Muslims were thanking them. Here's one Muslim caught on camera over the weekend thanking the Jews who are calling for a ceasefire, going up to them and giving them a kiss on the cheek and saying, thank you for calling out these Zionists. And this young man, he's like, okay, thank you. Here's a hug. And just reading sort of like the comments on that, people are like, we need more of this, like love in the world, the peace. Yes, bring peace. It was amazing to read some of the responses to this. These anti-Zionist Jews are showing up all over these protests. And again, Muslims were thanking them for it. Here's these Jews believe that the real enemy of Israel are the corrupt Zionist leaders who don't give a rat's ass about Judaism at all. They wear it like a blanket. They used to believe that, of course, Zionists kicked Palestinians out of their homes and aligned themselves with Western warmongers. And you were seeing it from all of these different protests, like this gentleman. I'm a Jew, stop killing. Jews who are speaking out against the war, of course, are getting death threats. So if you are Jewish and you're speaking out against this and you're calling attention to this, there's been a lot of death threats leveled against these individuals, unfortunately, because it goes against the narrative. And that's why you're not seeing it in the mainstream media. It's well documented. Here's just one example. Here was an anti-Zionist portion of one of these rallies, and you can see how heated it gets from people that are not in agreement with these anti-Zionist Jews. Watch. He's asking, do you care about Jewish people? Do you care about Jewish people?
Be ashamed of yourself right now! Be ashamed of yourself! Disgusting creatures!
Creatures. They're creatures. They're creatures. So it's well documented that Zionists collaborated with Hitler and the Nazis. Very clearly, any idiot with a brain can read a history book and see how well documented that is. They openly allowed the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Jews while protecting and enriching themselves. Jews that escaped Auschwitz, as we talked about here, told the Zionists what was happening and unfolded in the concentration camps. Those that escaped Auschwitz believed that the Zionists were just as bad as the Nazis. And I saw a bunch of people in the chat saying, fact, fact, fact. Yeah, read a book. Understand your history.
Yeah, it's
well known.
It's very uncomfortable, but it's not hard to verify.
Well, and I have a lot of Israeli friends, and the Israeli friends tell me, they're like, it was unbelievable in the early days, right after the war. When Jews who were in concentration camps were coming back to Israel, there was this, we don't even believe that you were in a concentration camp from the Zionists. We don't even, that you're making that up. We don't believe it.
Well, there was a prejudice
project
against people who did not leave early and then were victimized when they did arrive. There was also a major political movement to get into survivors' camps after the war and recruit those people to go to Israel because many of them wanted to get the heck out of the region, out of the time zone. A lot of them wanted to go to the UK or the US, and they were conscripted.
So this weekend, a Zionist decided to yell at Jews who were protesting the war. Here's what she said to them. Here, listen to her.
Too bad, but we're here and you're gonna go to hell.
So
that's a
so
nice thing
she's
to
telling
say.
she's telling those anti-war, anti-Zionist Jews that Hitler made a mistake in not putting you in a gas chamber.
That's awful.
And that she would be okay, though, as a Zionist. She'd be fine, right? Because, you know, she's one of the wealthy elites, I guess, and powerful, and she would have been helping to coordinate that, I guess. Unbelievable. Imagine saying that to another human being.
No, I couldn't imagine. Like, did you see the videos on Twitter also of the Israeli police throwing Jews around that were?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was
exactly. The pro-peace Jews who, and being thrown around by
in
police.
Israel.
Right, but you won't see that. You'll only see that on social media. You're not going to see that on NBC Nightly News or CNN or Fox News or anything because it goes against the narrative, right? So, but instead of covering the mainstream media, instead of covering these nuanced stories because they're uncomfortable, they then hide it. The Western media, Western leaders have taken to labeling these protests as hate marches. So if you were there and you were like pro-peace and you don't want people dying, like that Jewish guy who was like, hey, I'm a Jew and I absolutely don't want people to be killed. And you're a hate marcher. That's who you are. Here's UK Home Secretary saying police should decide for themselves if these protesters, should be arrested, thrown in prison for carrying out what she calls hate marches. She dances around, though, whether the police should outright arrest them. She's like, I'll let that up to them to decide. But yeah, I really believe that they're fomenting terror. Listen.
But to be clear, you don't think it should go ahead?
I think I've been pretty clear that these are hate marches. They are, I think chanting of jihad on the streets of Britain in the 21st century is utterly despicable. And I don't see how any decent person or how the vast majority of the British people can find that to be acceptable behaviour. It's sickening.
You call them hate marches. Do you think everyone on these marches is hateful, as you put it?
I think, as I say, if you've seen images of hundreds of people chanting jihad, being corralled to do so,
everyone, even on the fringes of these marches,
flags,
is hateful.
Chanting from the river to the sea, which is a call to arms used by terrorists, celebrating the largest single loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, glorifying acts of terrorism. I don't think there's any other way but to call them hate marches.
Well, there are a couple of other ways you could label them, but you do you. By the way, look at the reporter's face when she's explaining what she's hearing, and she gives her a couple of opportunities, to say like, "Hey, are you really going along with this? I'm giving you an opportunity.
You
here.
Want to double down here,
you
girl?
Double down on this. These are hate marches. Like, are you going to go with that or not?" Her face was amazing. So here's a sampling. If you want to just see some sampling of all of these hate marches this weekend, watch the hate. This was London. Thousands there. They're chanting "Free Palestine."
Every
Occupation
minute we waste,
no more.
people are being killed in Gaza in real time. And I think people understand that, and that's why thousands, tens of thousands of people are gathered here today.
A lot of hate. There's a lot of hate there. A lot of hate. Now, I should be clear, as I covered earlier in this segment, there absolutely has been hate. There has been anti-Semitism. There's been really vile things leveled against Jews at some of these other protests. We've talked about it here on the show. Absolutely. There's been awful and vile things. But to label these people and Jews coming together with Palestinians and calling for peace, labeling them hate marchers, labeling them, just by using the word jihad, which is a totally conflated word, by the way, and totally taken out of context as well. That's been, since 9/11, that's been a word that's been bastardized by extremists. So there's other things you could label these things, but I think it's amazing that the Western media is totally hiding this story and not calling attention to the fact that, yes, there are Jews who want peace, who don't want people being killed. And that doesn't mean you're pro-Palestine.
Or that you don't care about the October 7th attacks.
Right. I mean, this is what, so someone in the chat just a second ago, Nathaniel says, Redacted is pro-Palestine? You make me sick. Thank you, Nathaniel. I'm sorry that you're sick because we do not like people being killed. and we actually want a ceasefire and for there to be cooler heads to prevail and come together at a table and actually have a talk and a discussion about some sort of a solution. I don't have the solution, whether it's a 2-state, 1-state, or no state. I have no idea. But all I know is I don't want people dying, and I don't want war. And I don't want people being killed on either side. October 7th, we condemned what Hamas did to innocent people and to those soldiers and taking hostages. And we're condemning what's happening now in Palestine. We're not pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. We're pro-human being, for crying out loud.
Exactly. We're pro the human beings of the world that get caught in the middle of this government wars. These are wars started by governments, fought by governments, and innocent people just get in the way of their agendas. We're for the innocent people around the world that get caught up in this shit.
Yeah, I was in America this week, and I was in a bunch of spots in America. And I was talking to a bunch of different people who are Redacted viewers, and it was funny to hear from them. They were like, "We are anti-war," and well, you would think, oh, Americans must all be warmongers. No, it's the government. It's the governments that are warmongering and fomenting these wars around the world. It's not the American people. The American people want to grow up and have their beautiful families and have the kids go to a great school and have a job and groceries they can afford and come home at the end of the day and play, soccer in the backyard with their son and daughters. That's what they want. They don't want wars. But that's what these governments want, and that's what these governments are doing. They're making money off of it. They're making billions of dollars off of it, and these innocent people get caught in between.
And that's also why you don't see that on the mainstream media. You don't see all the wars we're in. You don't see all the destruction, because if people knew that, like when people found out about Vietnam, millions of people went to New York and protested, because if people know that there's war, they protest. And this is a very, the media is covering this war extensively. And that's why you're seeing these huge numbers of people protesting all around the world. And that's exactly why it's hidden from the United States, because they know that if they show too much, they show the caskets coming home in the airplanes, they show the reality of war, we stand up against it because we all hate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I want to kind of dissect that comment a little bit, though, because it's weird to me, because we're coming out saying we're anti-war. We don't believe that people in Palestine should be just carpet bombed, and the person's like, well, that makes you pro-Palestinian. That makes me sick. So if you drill it down, saying I don't want Palestinians bombed is offensive enough to somebody that makes them sick. That means that the opposite of that must make them feel well, which is carpet bombing civilians. And that is just mind-blowing to me that you would take that stance.
So Nathaniel will ask you that, right, to Philip's point. Philip's very smart. So then the opposite must be true, right? If you're pro-Palestine, right? Or you say it, Philip. So that must...
If you're against a ceasefire.
Right, if you're against a ceasefire.
Yeah, if us saying stop bombing civilians in Palestine makes us pro-Palestinian, and that therefore makes you sick, then what makes you well, to me, what you're saying is what makes you well, then what makes you happy is the actual carpet bombing of civilians in Palestine.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
so Nathaniel, let's ask you.
At no point did we say we are pro-Hamas, because who is? We're saying we're pro like the civilians of Palestine, and that makes this person sick, that we want them to survive.
Right.
Just like regular families living their lives, us wanting them to have that opportunity is a sickening act.
Yeah.
I mean, that just,
yeah. So, Nathaniel, we'll ask you, do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy carpet bombing of innocent people? Like, does that make you happy at night when you're sitting around the dinner table with your wife or whatever? Do you talk about you enjoy that? Do you seek those videos out on social media? Do you go on Telegram and look at people being slaughtered? Like, does that make you happy? Seriously, it's a great question. If the opposite makes you sick, peace makes you sick,
then war makes you happy.
Then war must make you happy.
Well, and to defend, not to defend what he's saying, but to defend him a little bit, like we don't know. We know that the mainstream media tells people lies. We know that people get their information from things that aren't true. So sometimes when they believe those awful things, it's because they believe the narrative that they've been given through propaganda, and they think things have happened that actually haven't. And if you think those things have happened, then maybe you are more apt to really solidly plant a flag, because I can't think another human being would think that if they knew what was actually going on over there. So that tells me maybe they actually don't.
Yeah, because we just got a super chat here from RTX says, why does the mainstream media, and why does no one in the mainstream media ask Israel, hey, Israel, why did you create Hamas and ISIS? We, at the very outset of this conflict, we specifically talked about that here on this show. Of course, Hamas was funded by Israel and the United States. They had no weapons until the United States made them what they are today. And Israel's open about it. Netanyahu admitted, of course, they were funding Hamas. So they created Hamas. Yeah, it's a great question. No one in the mainstream media will ask that question. No one in the White House press corps is going to raise their hand and ask Karine Jean-Pierre, like, you know, how does President Obama feel about having helped create Hamas?
Right.
Or like adding to it, you know?
One voice that I haven't seen very much, and maybe it's just, you know, the algorithm is not surfacing these voices to me. So if you've seen, is people who felt like, oh, we need our revenge on Hamas. Let's go, Israel. And then has seen the extent of this coverage and was like, oh, this is not what I meant. That's too much, right? It's like when you tell your boyfriend to go beat up someone that hit on you, and then your boyfriend beats that person until they're almost dead, right? And it's like, wait a minute, this is, you know what I mean?
Did that happen?
No.
Okay.
It was in a book that I read recently. It's like, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Maybe that analogy didn't land. No?
Well, no, I get your point where you're like, oh, that might be nice. That guy was, I wouldn't say hitting on me. That would be a sociopathic. But if a guy did something bad to you, like, you know, the specific example, in Trevor Noah's book, he talks about how some boys were mean to him and he told his stepdad, and his stepdad went and beat the ever-loving crap out of these young boys because he was violent, the stepdad, and he knew it. So he like set a pit bull on somebody, and then when he saw how bad that kid got hurt, he felt bad about it. It was like, whoa, I took that too far. So I'm asking, are there voices like that? That's like, oh, I wanted revenge, but not like this. Right. Have you seen voices like this that maybe I'm missing because the algorithm doesn't? Because surely the mainstream media is not going to give those people voices, but they must be out there. So let me know. Well, I think we've had a great show tonight. And I think I love all of the back and forth discussion. I think we have the smartest audience in I don't know, what do you call this? Television, in YouTube, in Rumble,
in broadcast.
In broadcast. I love the back and forth with you guys. Again, we don't have all the answers and we don't pretend to. All we are is pro peace, and we're asking questions of these leaders who lie to us on a regular basis. They have a billion-dollar intelligence apparatus and machine that are controlling everything that you see and hear. And, you know, I think it's important for us to ask these questions. We're up against that wall of these people. So I think it's, you know, that's what we try to do here on this show. So, yes, you know what? I think we've gone on long enough. I can't really breathe anymore. I need to go take some NyQuil or something.
Ooh, that sounds like a party.
Yeah.
Let's go do that.
I've talked too much.
Can I get in on that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I had an overnight. I was, you know, I was in America and then flying, and then overnight flights and cold air blowing on you from the airplane vents and all that stuff. And to all the people I saw in Philadelphia yesterday, great to see you guys. Go Eagles! And had a delicious cheesesteak there. It was so great to be back in Philly.
All right. Well, tomorrow we'll maybe talk a little bit more about these rallies that we've just shown you and whether or not they're going to be legal for much longer in Europe, as various governments are going to have started to criminalize what you can and cannot say in your peaceful rhetoric or otherwise what governments find offensive. So we'll leave it at that.
I was going to say, we're also going to be looking at there's a secret memo basically leaked, a project plan for the movement of Palestinians out of Palestine into other countries. And Canada is at the top of the list. So will upwards of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians be moved to Canada as part of the Trudeau government's plan in collaboration with Israel. We'll talk about all of that on the show tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. Redacted.inc is the place to go. And we will see you back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. 4 p.m., guys. Have a great night, everyone.